just post all the training there for people to be able to refer back to, keep building out a repository. So,
right. Okay, let me share my screen here. Today's topic is animations in Flow, and this is number 12 or 13 of a series of these talks that we've done. We've done various other talks, and we've talked about color and categorized columns and driving chart elements from CSV files, all sorts of things. So each twice a week, we try and go into some depth on a particular focused topic. And the topic this week is animations. Let me start. I'm gonna bring this up in edit mode rather than present mode, because if you have some questions where we want to see how these things are constructed, it's just a little bit easier if I'm there from the get-go.
And Bill, can I interrupt you just for a moment here?
Yeah.
So I hate interrupting like this, but this is very related to the animation topic, but just for this audience, before I create the breakout room, I just wanted to quickly share one thing we just recorded that I think is just, I don't know, I'm really excited about it. So let me just quickly show it on this screen. But it's looking at that same climate data, but to the point of animation here, this is a live multi-user meeting. I won't go too far into the content, but just I wanted you to see this next step, which is basically starting to look from 1880 till 2020, the rise in climate or climate anomalies. And so here you'll see it start to animate through. And so this is a 35-second animation between one step and the other to basically build out this visualization that's very similar to what NASA put out, but that it's a live meeting. So there's my wife, and she's able to view it as well from her angle. So anyways, sorry to interrupt, Bill, but just before the breakout room, I just had to at least show a little bit. So I am done, and I'll let you get back on. But I think it's just amazing what you can do with animation, and there's a lot to explore there. So it's a very meaty topic. So thank you. Thanks,
Michael. Can I just make a comment about that? I just didn't. I mean, I'm actually I work in renewable energy and climate change stuff. I'm actually quite familiar with the data you just showed and some of the other animations. But I was looking at what you just showed, Dan, and I just couldn't actually sort of, it wasn't clear to me what I was looking at. I mean, I sort of do know, kind of, because I'm actually familiar with the data and some presentations of that nature. But it was just kind of like, okay, just a comment may or may not be felt useful to you.
Got it. No, thank you for the feedback. I'm a little too, I tend to get too excited about things. I can see you're excited about it, but which is great. But I think a few more we got to make it more understandable. You're definitely right. But anyways, it's all with this animation feature to try to tell the story dynamically, and I think NASA did that so beautifully. We just wanted to try it in AR basically and see what we can do in our platform. So, but I appreciate the feedback.
And we have an upcoming session. I forget exactly what number it is, but a few sessions from now, we'll have Michael on taking a whole session on AR videos. So that'll be a great session. Okay, let's see. I'm going to share my screen again here. Okay. Put this up here. What I'm going to do, I normally don't do this in one of these sessions, but I'm going to send you a link where you can access this session on your own computer if you want, because sometimes Zoom will be a little, depending on what the bandwidth that you have for your Zoom connection. Sometimes the bandwidth can make the Zoom animations just a little choppy. So I'm just going to send this to you. Let me see, did I get a copy of this? Hang on one second. Okay, so I just put a link to this flow into the chat area. So you can copy that out if you want. And if you want to exercise this on your own rather than going through Zoom, feel free to do it. Okay, what are flow animations? Well, First of all, the definition of animated is full of life, lively, interesting, eye-catching. You can find those in a thesaurus or whatever. That's what animations are. And flow animations are a way that we, they're a functionality we have that make these presentations more eye-catching, more interesting, and lively. So I'll just give you a real quick example here. I'm going to just go from step 2 to 3 in this flow, and I'll show you a quick animation. It's neither the best or the worst animation in the world, but what this animation does is it takes the dots, and those of you who have been on these sessions before, each dot, this happens to be life expectancy data, each dot corresponds to a row in a CSV file of life expectancy. This particular dot I just clicked on is the Netherlands, 1883, 42 years, and it's in Europe and a few other things. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to advance from step 2 to step 3 by clicking this play button over here. And what you'll see is that all of these dots will make a transit from where they were before into this nice set of dot curves that are the life expectancy curves for these various countries. So that's what it is when we're talking about an animation. And I'll give some more examples of this a little bit later. So that's what they are. Why do we use them? To achieve this liveliness and eye-catching appeal of these presentations. When do they happen? They happen between steps. When you go from step 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, that's when the animations happen. And the animation timing is set down here in an area we call step details. There's not much information here about each step, but one of the pieces of information is animation to next step, 4 seconds. This is the time it takes me to go from step 1 to step 2. I've set that to 4 seconds. And I've set several on here between 4, 8, and some of them are 2 seconds. So you can set what the animation time is as you traverse from one step to the next. That's when they happen. And how do they work? Okay. Let me tell you in verbal form here how they work. Animations happen when a data object exists on the current step you're on. Let's say right here, I'll go to this step. And then when I make the transition to step 3, if this data object exists on that step, then, or is visible on that step, then I will see an animation as each dot here will travel to its destination on the succeeding step. So let's say if a chart is identical on step 1 and step 2, there'll be no animation because the dots are already in place. There's nothing to animate. If the chart is invisible on step 3, there will be no animation because there's nothing for it to animate to. However, if it exists on step 2 and on step 3, you'll see animation. And this happens for any kind of data object, dots, charts, images, text. All these things are programmed to animate, and they animate according to the rules of the animation engine that's inside Flow. You can't control exactly how the animation engine works, but what you can do is you can control what your destination configuration of that data object is going to be, and you can control the configuration of it on the preceding step too. So you have a lot of control there. And I want to say one of the things that's kind of counterintuitive. An animation will happen for a data object from the current step to the succeeding step, even if it's invisible on the current step. That one is kind of counterintuitive, but it is the secret way that we make a lot of these really spectacular animations happen. The object can be invisible on step 2, and if it's visible on step 3, you're going to see a full animation from how it's configured on step 2 to how it's configured on step 3. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, next step here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to go from this step and to the succeeding step. And we've seen this just a few minutes before. I just showed it as an example of an animation. And if you've been with us in prior sessions, you've seen something similar to this with this life expectancy data several times. It's a kind of a showcase data set that we use. Okay, I'm going to have a little fun here. I'm going to go into step 4 from step 3. All these dots are going to travel. They're going to travel into something that I've put onto step 4, which we call point cloud. And we're starting to see more of these pop up in our customer base. A point cloud is basically a set of points that are configured to go into a 3D object. In this case, the 3D object is the word high. Okay, just arbitrary, just to have a little fun with this. I just chose to do that. So now we're sitting in step 3, and I'm going to see what happens when I go into step 4. Let me show you first what the CSV file is for this step, for this swarm, and then you'll see what I'm doing here. Okay, so this is the life expectancy data. I've got year, country, life expectancy, latitude, longitude, continent, all these kinds of things. Then I added a few more data elements to the end of this CSV file. I just added a sequence, original sequence number. So row 1 has a value of 1. Row 8038 will have a value of 8038. It's just a sequential number. And then I just did, when I was setting up this point cloud, what I did is I set up the XYZ coordinates for each dot in that point cloud. Okay. So what we're seeing here now are the points in that point cloud for the word high in 3D. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make a transition from step 4 to step 5. And what I'm doing here is I'm just taking account of certain attributes that happen to be in that point cloud. The particular attributes that I'm showing here is just the count of dots in the point cloud in various sections of that HI. And I'll just go back here for a second. This is zone 1. This is zone 2. This is zone 3, 4, and 5. That's what I used in constructing this point cloud. So now what I'm doing here is I'm animating, and I'm just doing the counts, and I'm counting the data. I'm not coming up with a numeric count. I'm coming up with a visual count. So this is what I'm doing here is the object that I have for this swarm, the chart, is what we call a skyscraper chart. So every dot from that HI made a transition here in that animated way into this chart. So that is an example of 8,000 data points animating from one step to another. Now I want to take you back through a much simpler set of examples here, just so you can see exactly how these things work. So the next 6 or 8 steps I'm using a tiny little micro swarm. Okay, if I look at the data in this swarm, it's only 4 data points. Okay, it's 2 data points for New York, 2 points for California, 2010 and 2020, and it's wine production. Okay, 2 large wine producing states in the country. The green dots are California, the red dots are New York. Okay, so this is a little micro swarm. It's displayed on this step in a random cube of 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Only 4 data points, so it's not very interesting, but that's what it is. That's what the default composition of this chart is. So now I'm going to go from step 6 to step 7 here. And I don't know, I'm not sure how that came across on Zoom. It was probably choppy, but these dots did animate. So the 2 green dots for New York and the 2 green dots for California are in a different configuration here. And this is a very simple scatter plot. It's just year and wine production. Okay. The next step, I'm gonna go from step 7 to 8. No animation because there was no change in my chart. So the animation actually could have happened, but you would not have seen it because the dots are staying in place, basically. Okay, let's go from step 8 to step 9. Okay, here what I've done is I've changed the orientation of the chart, and I changed the axes also. I flipped the axes. I put the year on the vertical axis and the wine production on the horizontal axis. And I also shifted the orientation of my chart. So animation happens when the camera moves. When you move your camera position, that will also cause animation to happen, so that when the data moves from the prior step to the succeeding step, it's going to be in sync with the way you've set your camera. Okay, so that's the new thing we saw there. I'm going to go back here. I'm just going back to the original scatter plot here. Okay, so back where I began a couple steps ago. This time I'm going to go from step 10 to step 11. And here, once again, I don't know how choppy it was. It's very smooth on my screen. It'll be very smooth if you run it on your own screen with that link to the flow. So what I did here is I moved my camera. So I actually went through the chart, and then I turned the camera around. So I was looking back into the chart. So the camera, I took the camera through the chart, and then I did a 180-degree swivel to look back at the chart. So let me play that animation again, and you'll see what happens here. So, okay, I'm going through the chart, other side, turning the camera around and looking back at the chart. So animation happens when the camera position changes, and here I've done just exactly what I told you I did. So you can get some very unusual and interesting animations if you play with the camera in inventive ways. Okay, and we're going to do that a little bit later here. Any questions up to this point? Okay. Okay, let's go to this next item here. Okay, what I'm doing here is on this particular chart here, I've gone from a scatter plot, which I was on step 11, to a categorized column, okay, which I am on step 12. Okay, so categorized columns are another way of counting dots. Here I've got 2 dots for California, and I've got 2 dots for New York. I'm just putting them in a categorized column. So any type of chart you're moving the data from, the animation will happen to get it from its original position to its ending position here. Next step. Okay, this also works for maps. So here what I did is I moved that same data from the categorized columns onto a map of the US. So sure enough, here's California, here's New York. That's the data, same data I had. Here I'm just displaying it in a different way. And here my chart type is map to regions. Okay, another thing I did here, just because I wanted to make it the next step a little bit interesting, is I put an image on the chart. So this particular, or on the step. So this particular image here, right here, this resides in a file on my hard drive called Walk for Training 1. So I just put that onto the onto this particular step. Okay, I'm going to go now from step 13 to step 14. Okay, so let me play that again. The point of this step is everything can animate. You're going to see the data is going to animate off the screen. The map's going to animate. The bird is going to animate. Just going to play it one more time here. So everything is moving. I chose not to move the text. Okay, so the question I have for you guys is where's the hawk? Where is the map? Where are those objects now? Can anybody tell me where the map is or where the hawk is? How about taking a guess?
Are they behind us?
Yeah, one of them is. Yep. Yeah, the question is, where are they now? And are they invisible on this step? Okay. The fact that they animated means that they are visible. Okay? If they were invisible, technically, the animation would not have happened. And I can see that they're visible because down here on this, on the data objects here, I still see 4 objects. This is what's on my current step. But what I've done is I've contrived it so on this particular step, the map is way off to the left and the hawk is right in back of my head right now. You're right. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to zoom out my camera. I zoom the camera out. Okay, there's the hawk. Here is the little scatter plot. Okay, so these things are still technically visible on the screen, but I've got my camera in a position where I can't see them. The hawk is in back of my head, and the map is off to the left side of the screen. Okay, but technically those objects are visible on the screen, which is why they animated. Okay, so now let's go kind of a logical next step. Let's bring them back. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go to the next step. And here I've configured the map so it ends up at this place. And I've configured the hawk so it ends up where you see it right now. So as a flow designer, the way you're always configuring these things is you're generating where you want, where you know where the object began, or well, maybe not. Sometimes you know where the object began, sometimes you don't. But depending on the type of animation you want to achieve, you definitely know where you want things to end up on the succeeding step. Okay? And then depending on how you want your animation to go, then if you want to set it up in some special way, you can set up the objects so they exist on the prior step. And then on the prior step, if you want, you can make them invisible. So they won't even show up on the prior step, but they still will animate into the succeeding step. Okay, let's see. I think that's all I want to say about that. Now, I do want to spend a little bit of time though and show you some really great animations that you all have access to. Before I do that, any questions? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the next step. Okay, notice this guy is animating in from the left. If I look at step number 16, the only data object visible on this step is this text box. Okay. If I look at so how did I get that animation to happen? Let me go back to step 15. Okay. Step 15, we've got the hawk and the map, but I don't even want to consider those. I just want to think about this text box. There we are. Okay. The reason I got that kind of animation is because on step 15, let me make this text box visible. And I make it visible by clicking this little eye icon here. Okay, we covered this when we talked about the object's timeline several lessons ago, but to make an object visible or invisible on a step, that's done through this little eye icon. So when I make this text object visible, it's over here. You can barely see it. I mean, it's tiny. I made it so it's virtually invisible. Or I did make it invisible when I actually played through this presentation. But right now it is very close to being invisible. It's tiny and it's located right here. So let me make it invisible. I'll leave it visible the whole way here. Okay. I'm going to animate it. Yep. So here it comes. And this animation is timed to take like 4 seconds or 3 seconds. So that's why this text kind of swoops in from being tiny right here to being how you see it here. And it's all set up. If you know how the animation engine works, you can play it to your advantage. And so the way you configure your data objects and the way that you use your camera, those are your weapons for coming up with really interesting animations. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I'm just going to go out of this flow quickly, and I'm going to visit some of these. In my opinion, if you look at these 6 featured flows and advance from step 2 to step 3 and Trump tweets, and 4 to 5 and how big is big tech, you'll see some what I think are really great examples of animations. Some of these are done by us. Some of these are done by our customers. So the first one I'm going to do is Trump tweets. And let me go to my cheat sheet here. I want to advance from step 2 to step 3. So I'm going to play Trump tweets here. This is a short and very interesting flow, actually. It's kind of a sweeper. It looks very simple, but it's got just some great animations in it. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to go from step 2 to step 3. So let me advance from step 1 to step 2. And even this animation is pretty interesting. It's kind of reminiscent of the first one that I showed in my presentation. Okay, this is a very interesting flow. It's got 2 time axes. You've got time going along the depth axis, and you've got time going across the time of day here on the x-axis. So I don't recall seeing another flow that has 2 axes using for a timeline. So, but the topic of this is animation. I'm going to take you through the animation here. We travel down this timeline. We're looking at all of Donald Trump's tweets the whole time he was in office. We're going to spin the camera around. Now we're going to back up, and we're going to get to the end of his tenure of president, or at least the tenure of the topic of this particular presentation. And here we can see that as time went on, his tweets became more popular. And there was a flurry of them toward the end of his presidency. I mean, he kind of went awash in tweets there toward the end. Okay. Anyway, that's a very good flow to look at if you want to see a very interesting animation there. That's Trump tweets. One of my favorite animations. This was actually done by a customer. How big is big tech? I'm just going to play this one. This one also has an audio component to it. So what I want to do here is I want to advance from step 4 to step 5. And the whole premise of this flow is, hey, these technology companies are huge. They're really big companies. So let me position on step 4. I won't go through the whole presentation here. But here he's talking about Alphabet, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. And the point he's making here is, how big are these companies? What he's done here, he's got these in categorized columns, and he's got his animation. So it's playing, you're traveling up these skyscrapers where each dot represents $1 billion or something. And in this animation, he shows how huge Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Facebook are with respect to all the rest of the Fortune 500. Really a good animation, and this plays perfectly into his data story. The next one, I want to go to Texas power outage. This is a flow that Michael wrote. Okay, it's right here. It's a very sophisticated flow, probably from a topic standpoint. It's probably our most sophisticated flow. And what Michael does in this flow, he follows 4 charts of temperature, availability of different types of power generation capabilities, the frequency at which the power grid is operating, and the like. And let's say I want to find step number 10 here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, I want to animate from this step here. Also, in a major or a significant issue that happened during this Texas power outage that happened a little bit more than a year ago is it's a free market electric power situation in Texas. And Texas has its own power grid. They're not interconnected to any other power grids. So consequently, they can provide inexpensive electricity to their citizens. But when something goes haywire, the prices go haywire too. So on this particular step, I'm progressing from his step 10 to 11. And what this step shows is how the price of electricity over the course of 2 days in February of 2021 went from like $30 a kilowatt hour up to $7,000 a kilowatt hour. So it rose by just an enormous factor, factor of more than 200 in price. Okay. So this is a really great animation on that. And it kind of, as you're going through this flow, this one kind of sneaks up on you, and all of a sudden you're looking up into the sky at where the price of electricity went. Very, very impactful. Let's see, next one is flow about flow, step 16. Yeah, whenever I'm giving presentations to new accounts, I'm taking them through this flow about flow. And one of my favorite parts in this presentation, there's several favorite parts I have, but one of the favorite parts occurs up around step 16. It's not that one. It's not that one. It's not this. Well, okay, this is the one. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm taking you through foot traffic during the year 2020, the COVID year. I'm taking you through foot traffic at the Home Depot, Target, McDonald's, Costco, and Starbucks. And what this step is programmed to do is to, on a time-lapsed basis, takes about 20 seconds, take you through how the foot traffic went in these establishments during the year 2020. So we just passed March, everything took a nosedive. Okay, actually, I'll let this complete playing out and then I'll show it to you. Okay, so the animation is all of these curves got drawn just now in for this foot traffic along these in these establishments. This is one of my favorite charts in Flow because I think it's relevant to every organization in the world. And every organization has a timeline that they're living through, and they have different curves that they may want to look at and compare and contrast what different things are doing on this timeline. And here, this happens to be foot traffic in these 5 establishments. So this kind of a 3D scatter plot is really useful. For example, if I was more interested in the future rather than the past, I might want to look at this 3D scatter plot from this angle, so I could see the momentum of these curves as it goes into 2021. You know, maybe that's my interest. I'd look at the chart from this angle. If I was more looking at it just from the history of, hey, what happened in 2020, I might look at it flat on this angle here. And here, what I can see immediately is something strange happened here. This is Home Depot had an all-time record surge in foot traffic in their stores right in the middle of the pandemic, the worst part of the pandemic. So, you know, April, May, June 2020, all of us were imprisoned in our homes, and we went out to Home Depot. And, you know, I was one of these people, had a huge upsurge of foot traffic. This also shows that Starbucks never really did recover. I mean, even at the end of 2020, Starbucks foot traffic was still down by almost 30%. So this is a really good flow for the animation, or excuse me, a step for that particular animation. I'll take you just through one more. It's the last one on my chart here. It's the IME COVID infection story. Let me see if I can find it. IMHE. Here, it's over here. This one here. And what I recommend you do on this one is, hey, take a look at every step. I mean, these are they're gorgeous animations. None of them are particularly tricky like some of the others are, but it's just a very, very well done flow in that it conveys interesting information, and most of it through animation. So here we are, January 1st, 2020. A lot of people have never been infected. Actually, nobody was infected by COVID that we know of at that time. December 13th, 2021, almost 2 years later, never infected is 60% of the people, and infected about 40%. And this isn't too long ago. This is December 13th, 2021. January 18th, 2022. This is at the height of the Omicron infection rate. So we saw the never infected number of people really diminish, fraction of people diminish, and the number of infected people greatly grew even during that month and a half or thereabouts. Then what the author of this chart of this presentation does, it takes you through the estimated infections. I'm just going to draw a time curve here for infections first. This is how the infections went in South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the US. Okay. And then the next step is showing how things went toward the end of that time period. Huge volumes of infections. Okay. Luckily, this was Omicron and not the first type of COVID virus. So by the time this time came, luckily we had things a bit better under control, let's say. And so if we look at the hospitalizations and lay the hospitalization curve on top of the infection curve, you see that a modest rate of people were infected badly, so they had to go to a hospital. And then the final chart, or the final step here, shows the death rate. And the death rate is so greatly far diminished from what it was back in 2020 and this just shows that through vaccinations and other protocols that we've gotten the death rate way down from where it was back in the 2020 days. So those are just some examples of animations. I think these are great animations, and as you get into building your data stories, I think you'll find that animations are a really important part of that. So I think that is all I wanted to. That's all I wanted to cover. I'll stop. Well, actually, I'll just pause here and see if there are any questions. Any questions from anybody? Okay. Let's see. It's about 6:15. We just got a couple minutes left. I think I don't know if other people went into Michael's breakout room or whether they had to drop off. But at this point in these sessions, normally what we do is we just take general questions, and if there are no general questions, we provide some answers. So Josh or Hal, do you have any questions right now? It doesn't have to be on this topic, it can be on any topic.
Well, not necessarily any topic, but I just want to know if you're going to send me a link for the follow-up, or we're going to continue on this one.
Oh, you mean for our meeting after this? Oh, yeah. I'll start a separate Zoom call.
Okay, perfect. Right, thank you.
Yeah, I'll see you within 2 minutes after this meeting.
Great.
So Sierra, do you have any answers to an unasked question for this week?
Well, my favorite is always to answer the question of where can I find more resources. So I'll go ahead and send in the chat a link to our help desk, which has a bunch of resources on there that you can search and find hopefully anything that you'd want to ask any future questions about.
Okay, great. Okay, and my favorite answer to an unasked question has to do with the object's timeline. So let me go back into this flow here. So this is probably old hat to Hal by now. Joshua, have you been into the flow editor yet? Have you done some flow editor programming yet?
No, not entirely. So I've been trying to watch some of the YouTube videos and just gain some knowledge. And I guess what I wanted to ask actually for when I do start building out my own flows is where I should start with reading and with YouTube videos, and what's kind of like the natural order of things so that I can get caught up.
Yeah, actually, Sierra, do you want to show Josh quickly around the help center?
Sure. Yeah, I can share.
I'm going to stop sharing. So just let Sierra take on share here. We'll give you a real quick tour of that, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about my topic, which will only take 1 minute.
Yeah, so this is the link I just sent in the chat. So, we have searchable articles here, or you can just do, we have a getting started page, where if you click on that, it'll tell you how to load your data, how to practice, and some of the different terms that we use, which can kind of sometimes be overwhelming, but these all link out to different articles. So if there's one thing you want to learn more about, that's a good place to start. And then we also have in our guides and tutorials each of our different guides to building a flow. So this will take you through step by step how to build a flow. So Bill has kind of a document style here of different steps. Mine is just a link to our I'll click on that real quick. A playlist that I created different videos about these different steps. Let me move this out of the way. And then Michael did a quick build in XR, so you can check that out with that link right there. But I mean, this is a good place, I think, to get started. And it also just depends a little bit on your personal learning style. If you do better via like watching people do things and maybe the YouTube videos, but I sometimes need like a little bit of a written out step-by-step, or just to dive in there, and start working on things myself. And then when I have questions, I'll go and search things. And that's kind of my learning style, but I think it depends. One other thing I'll point out here is this submit a request button. So if there's something that you are stuck on, you can't seem to figure out, it's not in our help center, or you just need a little bit more guidance, you can always just write us here, and we'll send you a message back, and it'll go to your email. So that's also another option. Or if there's any weird bugs you think you might be seeing too, that's where you would submit those.
Okay, cool. And I was also curious as to how long you would estimate onboarding time to be through all of this to just really be effectively using this software.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the person. So for me, I know when I was kind of coming into it, it was like I had some very basic stuff down, building some basic charts within a few hours. But then once, to get to be doing some more complex stuff took a few days to weeks. Bill, I don't know if you wanted to talk more about like the trainings that you do and about how long those sessions usually are for folks, enterprise folks that we're trying to get them trained in at a matter of like 4 sessions or something like that.
Yeah, the typical training sessions, and these are usually for our enterprise clients, it's 4 nominally 1-hour sessions. And what we do is we just go through the first day is really basics. The second day is more basics and options. Then the third day is everything we haven't covered up to that point in time. And then the fourth day is, or the fourth session is Michael comes in and talks about AR videos. So, that's let's say 4.5 hours of live instruction time. And what we do is we try and hold those with maybe 3 to 5 business days in between them so people can practice. But I think learning flow, it's kind of sequential. I mean, you learn one thing at a time. And the thing that I really try to hammer home when I'm teaching here is this, what we're seeing here is this data objects timeline. This is the key, in my opinion, this is the key to really learning flow and becoming a really good user in a minimal amount of time. On this data objects timeline, every data objects, let me go to a screen that's got several data objects on it. Okay, here we've got dots. This is the data. This is in the CSV file. That's what this data is. This is a label. This is associated with a dot in a particular way, and that's defined like on these kind of orangish colored items. That's you. The thing you do here is you click over here in the object's timeline, then you go over to the right and you find the definition. So for this swarm number 1 on step number 7, It's a scatter plot. The X axis is year. The Y axis is wine production. And there are other attributes. The size of the dots can be set, the color of the dots, all sorts of things can be set, how these axes labels work. So that's a swarm definition. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to click in this cell here. This is a connection. So here's the connections. Connections 3 is on swarm 1. And when the column values match according to state, I connect the dots. That's what that particular connection does. So actually, I accidentally turned it off there for a second, but the connections connect dots either to each other or to the surface of a map. And that's what connections are. Labels I just talked about. This is a text box. Blue is text. So this is the text that I was putting on this particular step. A very simple scatter plot is the text that I have. And images are over here. This hawk that I put on the screen. This is how you define an image. Really easy. You just tell the CS or the image file on your hard drive. That's all you need to define an image, and then Flow will bring in that image. Then you can move it around. You can put that image wherever you want it to be, and you can modify the size of it if you want. If you want it to be a giant hawk, you can take it up and down in size. You can have it so it's always facing the camera. Like if I swivel my camera right now, the hawk goes out of sight, right? But if I hit this parameter, face camera, the hawk is always going to be facing the camera, no matter how I swivel my camera. So there's things like that. There's several hundred settings that can be done, but there's probably 50 really basic things that you want to know how to do. And once you have those 50 basic things under your belt, you can compose some pretty good flows pretty quickly. And we've had people put up flows within a week of their first exposure. So it's the kind of tool. I think it's kind of like Tableau. Tableau, to use it at a superficial level, you can do it almost instantly. And the same with Flow. You can import data, you can put an image, you can put text almost instantly. But to really get proficient at it, to build a great Tableau dashboard, takes some practice and takes some experience and just knowing a lot of things. And it's the same in Flow. So what we're trying to do with these videos and texts, articles that Sierra is putting together on Help Center, we're trying to make that knowledge accessible to everybody who's a Flow user. So my advice to you, Joshua, is get comfortable with this data objects timeline. And then the process is always, muscle memory says, click here, then go here. So I click here, this is a swarm, it's a scatter plot, or this is zone chart. Okay. If I want to examine a text object, click here on the left and then go here. And this is your definition. So if I want to change that, I can edit the text. I can change the size of the text. I can change the font size. I can do all sorts of things, how it wraps and everything. So that's the muscle memory, data objects timeline, definition. Okay. And this is a good way to reverse engineer learning the product, by the way. If you get your hands on a flow like this one or whatever from our featured flows, you can just go in here, start examining some of the data objects, and you'll be able to put together how all these are pieced together. So that's a mouthful, but anyway, that was my 1 minute answer. And anything else, Josh or Hal?
No, that was very clear. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, that's great. Michael, any final words here?
No. No. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Hey, good seeing you all. We'll see you on email, and feel free to drop in on another session.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.